Hi everyone, here we are continuing on with our reading of Pliny's letter about Pliny the Elder's final moments to Tacitus. This is on page 259 of Richard Lafleur's Wheelock's Latin Reader. So, Iam navibus cinis incidebat, calidior et densior, iam pumices etiam negrique et ambusti et fracti igne lapides. Let's start from just the very beginning. Iam, so this means now, but this can mean next, then. We've seen this in both Livy and Pliny now. This is a kind of temporal connector next in the story, now. So now, incidebat, we can probably identify that first as a third person, singular, imperfective, or just imperfect indicative. And then incidebat, if we didn't know what this was, we'd look up Incido, and we'd see it there, but you should kind of realize that this is coming from incido, in plus then the verb to fall. So this is to fall upon, and we have noticed that when we have a prefix like this combining with a verb, oftentimes a vowel shift will happen and we'll get something becoming a short I, often as happens here. So this is what we have in incide, or incido, to fall upon. So cinis, if we look this up, it's masculine or feminine. It's ash, and that's our subject. This is our verb. And then this verb is going to be able to take what we might consider an ablative object. Sorry, that should be a B, ablative object. It's falling upon, on the ships. So, and now ash was falling on the ship. More hotly, and this is coming from calidus, this first declension adjective. And then this is the comparative form. This is the masculine and or feminine form, where the neuter would be ending in ius, so calidius. So calidior and detsior, they're not adverbs, they're not neuter, they're not ending in ius, they're ending in ior, so we know that they're modifying cinis, both of them together. We can kind of daisy chain. So we've got, now ash was falling on the ships, more hot and more dense, hotter and denser. Now, so we could say first, then, these yams are working together, and they're giving us a blow-by-blow account of the story. So first, ash was falling on the ships, hotter and denser. Now, next, second, pumice stones also, and, so this que, as often, we need to treat it as an and right before the noun or whatever it's attached to. That's just the way that we work with these enclitics. Functionally, their connecting power is right before the word that they are tacked onto. And black, and this is related to our word for combustion, so charred, scorched, and broken by means of fire. So this is an ablative of means. Stones. So all of these negri, ambusti, and fracti, they all agree with the lapides, masculine plural nominative. These are also things that are falling. So we don't have a verb for the second half of the sentence, but we can imagine it is incidebantur. Just a third person plural of that. Actually not tour, it's not passive. Incedebant, that they were also falling. Good. Cunctatus. So we can look this up and see that it means delaying, or having delayed. Maybe having delayed is a better way. There's a famous Roman general who had the kind of nickname of Cunctator, the delayer, because instead of having an open fight with Hannibal on the field, he would keep delaying the process, making it a war of attrition rather than a pitched battle. So having delayed, paulum. So this is, if you look it up in the dictionary, it could be coming from this adjective, paulus, paula, paulum, or it could be an adverb in its own, just paulum, an adverb meaning smallly. So paulus means small, and we can note that this paulum is really, this adverb that we're calling an adverb, is really equal to the neuter, singular, accusative form of the adjective. That's where we get adverbs from most of the time. So this is and a little. So having delayed a little, on. And this is whether. So this delay is really not just a pause. It's not a kind of, he's doing something else. He's playing Angry Birds on his cell phone. No. He is saying, he's delaying, he's deliberating for a little whether he ought to, nice imperfect subjunctive here. Again, it looks like the infinitive with a personal ending on the end. So whether he ought to flex, that is bend, and then the implied direct object here is his cursor. Bend his path, retro, backwards. That's a pure adverb. So having delayed for a little, whether he might or whether he should bend his course backwards, soon mocks to the gubernator, that is the helmsman, and note that that's in the dative, and this is going to be working with momenti. What we're getting here is what I like to call a participial sandwich. We get the noun of the participle, and then we get the participle that it agrees with, and then everything between these two words, part 1 and part 2, should be treated as part of this participial phrase. So to the gubernator, to the helmsman, advising, so that it's actually, this is the subject of the participle, so maybe I'll do participle s, and this will be participle verb, subject and verb. So independently we would have the helmsman is warning ut, that, or advising that, ita, thus, in this way, faceret. So the subject of this equals Pliny the Elder again. So and it works with flectoret here. So what we've got is soon to the helmsman who was advising that he, that is Pliny the Elder, do just this, that is, turn the course backwards. He says, and again the subject here is Pliny the Elder. Pliny the Elder says, brave men, he says, fortune aids. Fortune favors the bold is how we often see this. So fortes here, accusative, third declension, plural, brave men. Fortune is our feminine nominative singular subject, and that's the subject of our verb ought. So to do this whole sentence up until the colon, having delayed for a little, whether he ought to turn his course back. Soon, he says to the helmsman, who at that point was advising that he, that is, Pliny, do just that. Pliny says, hey, fortune favors the bold, seek, and this is an imperative, that's a command, sink Pomponianus. This is Pomponianus Tascius. This is the husband of Rectina. So this is, they got the letter saying, help, help, save us, and he's coming to do the saving. So he was, and this is Pomponianus that we're talking about, at Stabii. This is a locative. And in the plural, locatives look a lot like ablative plurals, and we have this as a plural because the town name is actually Stabii. It is plural, it's feminine nominative when we have the town in that form, Stabii, nominative, plural. So this is the ablative plural morphology, but it is actually the locative case, this kind of antiquated case, and that means at Stabii. So at Stabii he was, that is Pomponianus, and then he's also going to be the subject of this participle, diremptus, having been separated, or we might just say separated, because he's not pulled apart, by the middle of the bay. So really this says by the middle bay. That's an adjective, medius, ius, so by the middle bay, but we really in English have to say the middle of. And if you look in Lafleur on page 257, I'll just draw quickly the kind of map here. We've got here's the Bay of Naples with all this blue. And then we've got Misenum, where the fleet is, over here. Again, because there's a kind of island off here, this is a good port. The ships aren't going to get tossed around in the sea too much. We've got Mount Vesuvius over here erupting with smoke. We've got Pompeii, the famous city, right here underneath it, about to get totally engulfed, and Stabii is a little bit further down. So when we're saying the middle of the Gulf, we're talking about this whole area here, and we've known from what has been said that Pliny the Elder is making this kind of beeline straight to Stabii, but he's still separated by quite a bit. I love doing this all on a computer because it's so easy to erase my terrible artwork. Alright, so back to a reddish color, back to the text. So Sarkinas contulerat in nawam. So this is con plus pharaoh, That's the verb that if we were to see it in its dictionary entry, that's the first person singular. And remember that this is an irregular verb, ferere, tuli, latum, and then we would just put the cone throughout as a prefix. This cone doesn't actually change any of the vowels in the middle as we've seen elsewhere. With this tulerat, we know that this used to be an I, but we've replaced it here with an erat. That means we're in our pluperfect tense, pluperfect indicative. So he had blanked is what tulerat would mean, or erat in this sense or situation would mean. Contulerat means carry together all of his luggage into the ship. I think it's singular. Maybe it's naves here. But whatever. In plus an accusative. Certus fugae. I think I might have made a typo, but it's fine. Certain or dedicated, we might say, to fleeing. He's only got one thing on his mind. He had already loaded the ships with his luggage if a contrarius ventus recidisset. So this is our adjective modifying ventus, which is masculine singular nominative, and therefore it's the subject of recidisset. And we see that this means abate, subside. And what's a contrary wind? Well, that's a wind that's blowing opposite the direction you want to go. When you're in a sailboat, or even when you've got rows of oars, when you're going into a headwind, that's hard. So he wants the headwind to go away so he can actually leave the port. This is the problem. So I went over this a little bit in our class today, but it's worth revisiting here. This is, we can see a pluperfect subjunctive. That's what we get when we have our subjunctive, our perfect third principal part, recedi, with this eset, or isa, that makes it pluperfect, and then third person singular with the t ending. Those are the different ways that we can kind of break up this word into three parts: perfect, pluperfect, and then third person singular or subjunctive. So this is kind of getting to a contrary to fact, or contrafactual conditional. We don't have a main verb in the sentence. We just have curtus fugae being part of our then clause, what we might call the apodosis. This is what grammarians for over 2,000 years have been calling the then clause. The if clause is called the protasis. So the protasis, if, the apodosis, then. So I guess we do have a verb in the apodosis with contulerat. He had loaded his luggage onto the ship or ships, certain of flight, if it should have happened that the contrary wind, the headwind, the wind blowing onto the shore, had died down. Quo, to this place, tunc, then. So we got two kind of adverbs to start off the sentence. To this place, then, avunculus meus, my uncle, that's going to be our nominative singular subject, secundissimo, and that's going to be working with ventus. We see this a lot in Latin and what does secundo dum mean? What does this adjective mean? Well, it means following. And that means favorable. That means a tailwind. This is all coming from the Latin verb sequor, which is deponent. So then we have sequi, and then our third principal part, the perfect system, is secundus est, and that means followed. So this is where we get first versus second from. Second follows first. It's the following number. So my uncle, then, to that place, having been drawn by a favorable, that is a tailwind, and again, that's the same wind that's keeping Pomponius, that's contrary to his wishes, is what's bringing Pliny the Elder into shore. So you could see this as also an example of Pliny the Elder's daring, right? He is entering a place that he himself might not be able to escape, but he's going quickly there because the wind is blowing, following him in this direction. So he embraces complectitur, the trepidantem one. So we would find this in trepidans as an active participle, trepidantis, one of these third declension active participles. So this is the trembling one, the scared one, and that's Pomponius. So he embraces him, he consoles him, he encourages him. All of these are deponent verbs, and that's no accident. It's not just that by chance the three verbs that Pliny wanted to use, Pliny the Younger wanted to use here, were all deponents. He's being, artsy. by putting these all together. And in order that, so that the que gives us, again, as always, our connection here. This ut, when we see it with this imperfect subjunctive, and given the sense of the sentence, we know that this is going to be a purpose clause. Sometimes these are also labeled as final clauses, but I find that confusing. But it's a purpose. There's a reason. So in order that, that's how we express purpose, in order that the fear, the timor of him, and that is again Pomponius, sua, and that's possessive, dealing with the subject of the sentence. We sometimes call this reflexive because it's dealing with the subject of the sentence, which in this case is Pliny the Elder. So we've got eus referring to Pomponianus, sua referring to Pliny the Elder, and that's feminine ablative, working with securitate, with his own confidence, with his own steadfastness, soften, leniret. So to soften, to remove his Pomponianus's fear by means of his own confidence, he orders to be, so again, this is Pliny the Elder who is our subject. He orders himself to be carried, once again, we're seeing our verb pharaoh. Note that this is a passive infinitive. To be carried into a bath. Then, having been cleaned, having been washed, he akubat, he lies down. And why do you lie down? Well, either to go to sleep or in Roman culture, to eat. So he lies down for the purpose of eating after he's bathed. Again, this is a kind of flashback to what he had done at Misenum before braving the bay. So he, having bathed, and that's another thing that's showing that he really doesn't need to be doing this. He's going through all of these rituals to give a sense of ease to Pomponianus in this very terrifying moment. So having bathed, he lies down, he eats either, and sorry, this should be hilar, there, either happy himself, so hilaris is a masculine singular nominative adjective in this case. So either happy, truly happy, or that which is equally great. So again, this is a relative clause, but this is very parenthetical. I'm kind of surprised Lafleur did not put parentheses around here, saying a thing which is equally great, like he was happy. So similis takes a dative, similar to something. That kind of makes sense. So either he was truly happy, or what would be equally impressive, appearing to be happy. All of this is being done for the benefit of Pomponianus, who is terrified, like his wife, scared out of his mind about everything that's going on around them. And right now, there doesn't seem to be any chance of escape. But as Pliny the Elder had said just a few lines above, fortune favors the bold. So he's being as bold as possible. We'll see what happens in our next installment. See you then.